What is mind and what is body? I'm Chris McCord, and this is the School of Deepest Crash Flux in 10 seconds.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make it with Squarespace.
Famously, Descartes is a dualist or a twoist about mind and body. That means he believes there are two distinct substances, mind and body. A cactus, of course, is body because it's extended in space. That is to say, it takes up space in the desert, for example. Whoa, that cactus looks prickly. No, Pat, no, don't sit on that. The mind, soul, or consciousness has the essential property of not taking up space, but of thinking. Mind thinks, that's what it does. Wonder if he likes me, you might wonder, but your soul doesn't take up space, it just thinks. Oh no, Raggy, I think there's a ghost in the machine. Zoinks. That sound can only mean one thing. It's time to look at our philosopher du jour, Thomas Hobbes.
In Descartes' day, not all philosophers believed that mind and body were two separate things. Hobbes was a materialist.
And when we talk about materialism, we're not talking about what Madonna was singing about in the 1980s. No, to call Hobbes a materialist is to say he believed that everything is made of one thing, namely matter, which is the same as physical body. So for Hobbes, the mind and consciousness is also matter. That is to say, the mind, soul, consciousness, whatever you call it, just is the brain. Thoughts and feelings, then, just are physical entities. And if your brain ceases to function, materialism says you can't keep thinking because your consciousness was physical. Oh, all right, I've had enough. We're just going to cut this out. All right, Descartes has an argument, though, that mind and brain are not identical. Here's what it is. We're finally getting there. Premise 1. If the mind just is the same as the brain, then whatever you say about your mind is true of your brain. Premise 2. But you can know your mind exists while doubting your brain exists, because under that dream argument hypothesis, remember, you don't know you have a physical body and a brain, but you do know you're certain that you exist as a thinking thing, as a mind. So therefore, your mind, soul, consciousness, and your brain are not the same thing, according to Descartes. In Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven, a disembodied soul floats along the floor by the bust of Lenore. But that means that the soul is something separate from the physical brain, at least in Poe's poem. Which reminds me, I probably need to pick up some birdseed at Trader Joe's. So here's a little thought experiment. Is the part of you that thinks physical or non-physical? Could your mind keep thinking after your physical body and brain are dead? Could this child, you see depicted in the picture, keep thinking after her physical brain ceases to function? That brings us to a question about mind-body interaction. How does the non-physical mind-soul consciousness interact with the physical body? For example, can your mind deciding to raise your hand cause the hand to go up? Descartes has an answer. The non-physical mind's desire to raise your hand causes the pineal gland to send animal spirits toward regions of the brain that are connected to the parts of your body, muscles, and tissues that contract and pull your arm and hand into the air. But there's a problem with this. If mind, consciousness, soul is non-physical, then it does not occupy space. But if it doesn't occupy physical space, then Descartes is wrong to think it can interact with physical body. If it doesn't have a location, can't rub up against the brain. So, if your desire to raise your hand is not physical, it is hard to see how wanting to raise your hand can cause you to raise your hand. Simply put, how can a non-physical soul that occupies no space rub up against the brain? At what point in space could they touch if one of the substances is not in space? So, it's beginning to look like interaction of radically different substances is just downright impossible. Other philosophers have provided solutions to the mind-body problem. Gottfried Leibniz provided one called Parallelism. On this view, God fixes the world so that thoughts are in sync with physical actions, but there is no mind-body interaction. God synchronized the universe so that when you want to raise your hand goes up. But you wanting to raise your hand does not cause it to go up. Rather, it's God's pre-established harmony. Do you think maybe Leibniz looks a little too much like the lead singer of an 80s metal band? And then there's George Barclays' Idealism or Immaterialism. Barclay contends that there is no matter. So-called physical objects are actually ideas held constant by the mind of God and experienced by us in our own minds. So since everything is non-physical, there's no problem of how the physical and non-physical can interact. So, hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and comment below if there's anything you're interested in, and be sure to subscribe.